Welcome back, theology students, to today's Explainer. We are diving straight into a really fascinating academic deconstruction of the Islamic eschatological framework. You know, if you want to truly grasp Islamic moral philosophy, you absolutely have to look at the end game. So to do that, we're going to use a metaphor that I'm sure you are all intimately familiar with, the rigorous, proctored academic exam. We're going to explore exactly how this framework synthesizes strict human accountability with ultimate divine justice.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by defining the paradigm of Akhirah, look at life as a test, map out universal resurrection, examine divine justice and judgment, and then finally, we'll synthesize eternity, justice, and mercy.
Section 1. The paradigm of Akhirah. Okay, let's get right into it by establishing our foundational definitions.
So Akhirah translates to the hereafter. It's the eternal life that begins after death. And crucially, it is the specific theater where ultimate moral accountability is realized. Now, to understand just how vital this is to the theology, you have to realize that the Quran repeatedly pairs belief in Akhirah directly with the belief in God himself. It's not an afterthought, right? It is literally the structural spine of the entire Islamic worldview.
Let's look at how these four tenets build the framework of reality here. Earthly life is strictly temporary, while the hereafter is the ultimate, permanent reality. Within this temporary sphere, human beings possess free will, the agency to make moral choices. But, and this is key, that free will is intrinsically tied to the final point. Every individual faces absolute accountability for those choices. This paradigm completely shifts human focus from seeking temporal success to, well, preparing for eternal consequences. Section 2. Life as an academic test. Because if earthly life is temporary, we have to ask, what is its actual function?
Think of earthly life as the examination room. It's temporary. It demands intense focus on your choices, and it's entirely a test of faith and character. Then you have the final grade, the hereafter. That is eternal, it is heavily focused on consequences, and represents the ultimate reality. Human free will? That's simply the pen you use to write your answers while you're in that exam room.
As theology students, we always ground our analysis in the primary source texts. This verse from the Quran, chapter 67, verse 2, provides the absolute theological proof for this academic test metaphor. It explicitly states that God created death and life to test you as to which of you is best indeed. So the universe, in this view, isn't random. It's a purposefully constructed testing environment designed specifically to measure human conduct.
Now, the crucial part is understanding the grading rubric. In a real academic exam, your wealth or your social status outside the classroom isn't going to boost your final grade, right? The Islamic framework applies that exact same logic. Material success, earthly power, worldly distractions, they hold absolutely no value on this final exam. There's no extra credit for how much money you made. The assessment is based entirely and exclusively on moral conduct, righteousness, and sincere faith.
Section 3. Transition and universal resurrection. Because, of course, every examination period eventually runs out of time. So what happens when the proctor says, "Pencils down"? This chronological eschatology maps out the journey of the soul perfectly. First, we have earthly life, the test. Next comes death, which is merely the transition. And finally, we reach Yom al-Qiyamah, the universal resurrection. There's a really inescapable logical flow here. You take the test, your papers are collected, and then the entire student body is recalled to the auditorium for the reading of the final grades.
This verse from chapter 23 establishes the absolute certainty of this timeline. Then, indeed, after that, you will surely die. Then, indeed, you, on the day of resurrection, will be resurrected. Notice the academic gravity of this text. It outlines a truly universal event. No one gets an exemption. Every single human being who's ever lived is subject to this exact sequential process.
Therefore, in Islamic eschatology, death is absolutely not an annihilation of the self. It's just a functional pivot point. It is simply the closing of the exam booklet. The testing phase is definitively over. No more answers can be changed, and the soul just waits in transition for the grading phase to commence.
Section 4. Divine justice and judgment. This brings us to the single most critical phase of our theological timeline.
We call this Yom el-Din, the Day of Judgment. This is the ultimate grading session. All people will stand before God for a flawless, comprehensive moral auditing of every single earthly deed. Imagine an audit where temporal power, wealth, and status are totally stripped away, leaving only the raw, unedited ledger of your moral choices.
And this next text brilliantly illustrates the terrifying precision of this divine audit. From chapter 99 of the Quran, "So whoever does an atom's weight of good will see it, and whoever does an atom's weight of evil will see it."
One single atom's weight. This microscopic metric is meant to impress upon the believer that absolutely nothing escapes the final grading rubric: a passing thought, a minor cruelty, a silent act of charity. Things completely unseen by human eyes are meticulously recorded and weighed. It's the ultimate expression of divine justice. Because nothing is overlooked, true justice is actually achievable.
Section 5. Eternity, Justice, and Mercy. Now we reach our climax, where we explore the final destinations and the profound theological synthesis of this entire framework.
Based on that rigorous examination and the atom's weight audit, there are two distinct destinations. Paradise, or Jannah, requires faith and righteous deeds, resulting in eternal peace, joy, and closeness to Allah. Conversely, hell, or Jahannam, is the destination for those whose criteria is rejecting faith and persisting in wrongdoing, resulting in divine punishment. The primary texts are incredibly clear on these outcomes. Quran 18:107 grounds the definition of Jannah as the ultimate reward. It's the lodging provided for those who successfully pass the moral test by believing and executing righteous deeds back in the earthly exam room. On the flip side of that ledger, Jahannam is the direct, just consequence for those who deliberately failed the moral examination. And it is really crucial to note academically here that this is framed as a consequence for those who knowingly rejected faith and persisted in wrongdoing. It's the manifestation of divine justice against unrepentant oppression and immorality.
But here is where Islamic eschatology introduces a massive theological resolution. Because you might be thinking, if the grading rubric is precise down to an atom's weight, wouldn't everyone just fail? Well, this crucial hadith resolves that exact tension. The Prophet Muhammad stated that God wrote, "My mercy prevails over my wrath." So while the justice is absolute, it is ultimately contextualized within God's overwhelming mercy. This synthesis is what allows the believer to strive for perfection, while simultaneously relying on divine grace when they inevitably fall short.
So why does all of this matter for the believer today, right now, before the exam is over? Well, because this paradigm actively shapes a Muslim's daily moral outlook. It provides a strict sense of accountability. It ensures that flawed human justice systems are not the final word. It guarantees that the good deeds you did in secret will actually be recognized. And honestly, most importantly, it gives immense hope to the oppressed, proving that their suffering is seen and will be rectified, which ultimately drives purposeful, ethical living. We'll conclude our textual evidence today with this really profound reminder from the Quran. Compared to the sheer permanence of the final grade, the temporal world is mere amusement and diversion. The home of the hereafter is the true objective reality. And that leads me to leave you with this final academic challenge. If we truly internalize this framework, if earthly life is literally just a temporary exam room, and you are being graded on an atom weight rubric by a proctor who is perfectly just but also overwhelmingly merciful, how does that shift the moral value of the very next decision you make? Think about that as you pack up and leave the lecture hall today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the frameworks of reality.